We'll be in 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. Today I want to talk, as Kip kind of alluded to, is that we were made to worship. We were created to worship. Can you remember the first time you attended a church? For some of you, you might have to dig way back 20, 30, 40 years. For some of us, maybe it was recent that you attended a church for the very first time. I remember my first time. I was a freshman in high school, and my friend had invited me to this really old, really small Baptist church. And they had a traditional service at like 8 a.m., and then they had a contemporary service where things got edgy at 11 a.m., and then in between, by the way, the way they got edgy at the contemporary service was they went away from the organ and then brought out a keyboard. I remember going to that 8 a.m. service as a freshman in high school with a friend of mine, and I remember getting there, and there was a choir up on stage. They were all wearing these beautiful, elegant robes. There was the oldest lady on earth playing the organ. I would always lean over and be like, is it really her, or are they just propping her up? Kind of thing. And we'd sit in these crusty pews, and I don't want to talk poorly about this church. It's where I found my faith. It's where I was saved. I attended there all the years that I lived down there in Southern California, so for about 4 years in high school, 9th through 12th grade, before moving up here. So foundational to my faith. But my first experience, we'd pull out these dusty hymnals, and we'd open it up, and we'd all sing together. And I thought to myself, how unusual this is, how uncomfortable. And I was confused. What are we doing? Why are we singing? Who are we singing to? This is uncomfortable. There was always, this never happened in the traditional service, but in the contemporary service, some people would be raising their hands and engaging, in worship and being active in worship. And I was so confused. I was so confused by it. And I think for some of us who might be newer to Jesus or newer to attending church, maybe you've had a similar experience where you've seen some things that, that happen on a regular basis on a Sunday morning at a church service, and you wonder to yourself, what is that? That's confusing. Why are we doing it that way? What's up with that? Or actually, even if you've been attending church all your life, maybe you've forgotten the value and the importance of how worship is vitally important to our walk with Jesus. Vitally important. Coming together as a church body to sing and offer praises to our Creator. How vitally important that is to our daily walk. And worship and music in the church has been vitally important for centuries. 2,000 years ago, when the church was born, at its birth, it caught on like wildfire throughout the known world. And at the same time, the New Testament, the second half of the Bible, the New Testament, the books that we have today, was in process of being written. People like Paul and Peter, etc., were writing these letters and writing these to help the body grow, to help teach people and how to disciple people. This was all happening simultaneously. But because the church was catching on like wildfire, the apostles came together and they came up with this idea to write a statement of faith to help people know what we believe and why we believe it. They called it the Apostles' Creed. And then a few years later, another creed was written called the Nicene Creed. And what's fascinating about the Nicene Creed, this statement of beliefs to help, followers of Jesus know what they believe and why they believe it, to kind of empower the church. What's fascinating about that particular creed was why it was written. We know why the Apostles' Creed was written, but the Nicene Creed was written actually in response to an anti-Christian movement. There was an anti-Christian movement. There was a guy named Arius who started this movement of heresy and was attracting and pulling people away from the church. And so the leaders of the church realized, We have to write a response to this movement that Arius was kind of championing, and it was actually named after him. It was called the Arian movement, and so the church realized we have to write this creed in order to respond to the stealing of these members into heresy, into unbelief, into not doctrinal stuff. What's fascinating, and here's kind of the point, and this is how it connects to worship. What's fascinating about Arius is he wasn't known as a teacher. He wasn't known as a theologian. He wasn't known as, a scholar. He wasn't known as that. He was known as a worship leader. And what he said was that it's easier to get people to believe heresy if they sing them. If I can just get them to sing the heresy, if I can get them to sing the non-doctrinal statements, I can woo them away from Christianity into this heretical movement. And actually what ended up happening and why it was such a big deal that a creed had to be written by the leaders is because he would use catchy tunes and use just like the easy to remember things. And so like sailors and people working in the harbors would sing them as they worked. It would catch on, it'd get onto a ship, and then, people all over the world would start singing these songs that were heretical. What we sing matters. Our worship today, what we just did and what we will do and what we do every Sunday matters. And so in 1 Peter chapter 2, I'm going to go ahead and read that. And I want to look at this passage with the lens of how we were made to worship. How we were made to worship. And so 1 Peter chapter 2, let's go ahead and read it. I'm going to look at the screen with you guys. It says this. So get rid of, Peter's writing this, by the way. Peter says, get rid of all evil behavior. Be done with all deceit, hypocrisy, jealousy, and all unkind speech. Like newborn babies, you must crave pure spiritual milk so that you will grow into a full experience of salvation. Cry out for this nourishment. Now that you've had a taste of the Lord's kindness, you are coming to Christ, who is the living cornerstone of God's temple. He was rejected by people, but he was chosen by God for great honor. And you, that's us, are living stones that God is building into his spiritual temple. What's more, you're not just the living stones. You are his holy priests. Through the mediation of Jesus Christ, you offer spiritual sacrifices that please God. And I think this is how it concludes. Oh no, this is point number 1. So let's just jump right, that was how it concludes. Point number 1 from this passage is, worship is a cultivated craving. Worship is a cultivated craving. And it says, Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 2, the verse 2, like newborn babies, you must crave spiritual milk so that you will grow into the full experience of salvation. Cry out for this nourishment. Anyone here currently have a newborn? Jasid is raising his hand up there. Yeah, Jasid and his wife Natalie just had a baby. Her name is Elena. Is that right, Elena? Yeah, here's a picture of her. Just a big shout out to her. That's her. All the oohs and ahs. Yeah. How old is she now, Jasid? Natalie, are you here? Is Natalie here? 2 months. Oh my gosh. Natalie's. I don't see her. She's probably. She's out back. Yeah, taking care of Elena. Why, Jasid, why does your baby cry? Huh? When she's hungry. Yeah, she's hungry or tired but she's hungry. She's hungry. That's how that's how I cry, actually. That's why I cry, when I'm really hungry. Me and Elena, we were the same, twin. Because they're hungry. Babies crave food. And actually, as a baby grows into a child, you as a parent can start picking up on when they're going to be sick, when they start to lose their appetite, when they start to not be super hungry and, I'm not hungry, I don't want that. Something's up when your child is no longer eating. It could be a sign of sickness. It's a sign of something going on. You can start to know that, there's something internally not working when your child stops being hungry. The same thing happens spiritually with us. When you've stopped being hungry, when you've stopped craving, when you've stopped desiring God's presence or God's will, there's something going on inside when you've stopped being hungry. And Peter says, when it comes to worship, when it comes to our walk with Jesus, when we've, you need to crave this, like a newborn baby. This is something we crave, we hunger after, we cry out for this nourishment. Have you perhaps sensed this craving in your life? This hunger even here on a Sunday morning? Have you sensed it in your heart that there's something going on? There's something deeper happening. Maybe if you were here at our Good Friday service, or maybe if you've attended some of our worship nights here, there's a hunger in our people. There's a hunger in me. There's a hunger in us. There's this desire to crave. If you were here Easter Sunday during baptisms and people were giving their life to Jesus through baptism while we are in here worshiping God together, there's something going on with that. And I think that we might be getting bored with coming to church just to check off a box. Coming to church just, I'm going to come to church and I'm going to leave like as if nothing changed. I'm going to leave like as if I just didn't experience the presence of the creator of the universe. I think what's happening is there's a hunger, there's a craving, there's a desire for nourishment, a crying out for what Peter calls spiritual milk, an experience of salvation. Over the years, as a leader in the church or as a pastor here, sometimes I can hear this phrase, particularly when people are leaving, the church and maybe just leaving. I've heard this phrase saying, I'm not being fed anymore. Or I'm not getting fed, or the word isn't feeding me here anymore. I'm not nourished, I'm not getting fed. And I do think that there's a difference between getting fed and being on a hunger strike. I think that there's a difference when it's I'm not gonna eat anymore. It's not that the word isn't feeding, it's that maybe you're not hungry anymore. And let me give you an example. So, recently, my wife and I, Chelsea, we are allowing our kids to play video games, maybe the past year and a half or so. It's kind of a newer introduction into the house, maybe 2 years now, so maybe not so new. But on school days, there's no screen time. Well, if we're having a hard time and if we're just over it, we'll have some screen time. Yeah, all the parents in the room are looking at me like, you're such a liar, John. You allow screen time on school days. You guys are calling my bluff. But truth, limited screen time on school days. But on weekends, we ease up a bit. He'll play for hours and hours if we'll allow it, and he'll just lose himself in video games. And usually, my son Lincoln, he's 8 years old, usually he's just a garbage disposal. Usually he's eaten. Like he's the Hawaiian rolls that I get at Costco, he'll eat both packs. Just eat those. Like he'll go to usually that's how it goes. But when he's locked in on playing, Minecraft or whatever it is on the Switch, I'll yell out to the living room like, "Hey Lincoln, are you hungry?" Like, "Hey Lincoln, are you hungry?" And he'll be like, "No, I'm not hungry." And I know he is. He hasn't eaten in 5 hours. But he's like, "No, I'm not hungry. No, I'm not hungry." I know he is. And a lot of times, I think that we can do the same thing with church. We can be full on all sorts of different things and not come to church with a hunger, not come to the presence of God with a desire, a craving for the presence of God. Because, man, we're distracted by other things. In my son's case, a video game, right? We're distracted by the ways of this world. We're distracted by all the different things that come up in our life. Isn't it funny, though, how the world has we all crave something. And isn't it funny how the world has an answer for our cravings? Keep pursuing that job and climb that ladder, make more money, then you'll feel filled. Then you'll feel full. Or, oh man, more sexual partners, bring them all in, then you'll answer that deep desire of your soul. We were made to worship, and we were made to worship one thing and one thing alone, the creator of this universe, Jesus Christ. Could you imagine if every time we gathered, there was a hunger in all of us? This intense craving that became looking for God, looking for his goodness, looking for his mercy, looking for his forgiveness, looking for his nourishment, hungry for the word, hungry for worship, hungry for his presence, and begin to stir up this craving. Psalm 38, actually, no, Peter says this in verse, can you pull up the verse, Jesse? Yeah, there it is. In verse 3, now that you have had a taste of the Lord's presence, this craving comes as you taste the Lord's presence. In Psalm 38, it says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Maybe you're here today and you're like, Jonathan, that craving that you're talking about, I'm not feeling it right now. I walked in through these doors and I'm not, there's no hunger in me. I'm coming into this building maybe full of the things of this world, and there's no real hunger for the presence of God. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Your honesty is the very first step towards your craving. And the next time we enter into worship, offer this honesty as a sacrifice to God. Tell him that you want this craving. I want your kindness, God. I want your goodness. Give me an experience. Give me a taste. Give me a moment in your presence to cultivate that craving, because some cravings are cultivated. You don't just pop into a craving for the gym, right? You don't just desire to destroy your body working out. That is a cultivated craving. As you work out 3-4 times a week and you go regularly and build that craving in your life, that then all of a sudden, if you're here and you've worked out maybe for years and you've developed that habit, you miss a week and oh my gosh, you're craving it, you're desiring it. You don't just pop into a craving for vegetables, right? You cultivate that, you grow into that. The same is true when it comes to the Lord. You build that every time you open up his word, every time you're here gathered together worshiping him. You grow that. You grow that in your life. That's number one. Worship is a cultivated craving. Number two, worship is communal. Worship is communal. It says in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5, you are living stones that God is building into his spiritual temple. You are living stones that God is building into his spiritual temple. Let me put some context around this and kind of pop into kind of who was actually hearing these words, about a little under 2,000 years ago or so. 1 Peter was written to a group of Christians that were facing significant and intense persecution. If you know anything about church history, it was from this emperor named Nero in Rome. He's a pretty well-known emperor in Rome and well-known for his persecution of followers of Jesus. And so the people who were hearing or receiving this letter, they were in hiding. They've just left Judaism. They've just started following Jesus. And everything is gone. They can't gather in the temple because of all the persecution that's going on. Actually, in fact, in a few years' time, the temple is going to be destroyed anyways. The priesthood is gone. Their way of life has been upheaved. It's upside down. And they're wondering, what do we do? And Peter says, we can't gather together in the temple anymore. And Peter says, you know what? We can't go to where the presence of God is, because the temple was for them was where God's presence was, and we can't do that anymore. So what do we do? And Peter says, you are the living stones. I know you can't go to the actual temple, and that doesn't matter. You're the living stones that God is building into his spiritual temple. When we gather right now as a church, when we gather together as a people, it is the living stones gathering together to rebuild the spiritual temple. That is what we are doing right now. As I look out into this room, we are all individual stones building a spiritual temple together. Not to trigger you, but do you remember 2020? Do you remember lockdown? Do you remember isolation? When the world reopened, when the church reopened, a lot of Christians opted to stay home. Many for health reasons, but others for convenience reasons. I'm kind of comfy here in my PJs. Kind of comfy eating my Fruit Loops, watching it on TV. That's why I'm here. I'm doing church. You can't do church as one living stone by itself. You can't rebuild the spiritual temple as one living stone by itself. No, you're one of the many living stones. And when your stone and my stone and your stone and your stone and your stone and all of our stones gather together on a Sunday, it's the living stone, stone by stone, we start to remake the temple of God. And yes, hear me, of course God can speak to you individually. Of course God can move powerfully in your life in personal prayer, in personal worship, in personal study of the word. Of course. Yes, God can move in your life as you listen to these words online right now. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But that does not replace this. That is not a replacement for this right here. That might work for a season. That may work sometimes. That may work on occasion. But this, the gathering of his people, this is the living stones gathering together to worship God, rebuilding the temple, the spiritual temple, stone by stone. God, let me put it this way, God dwells in the gathered assembly of believers in a unique way. What we experience here as a collective group, experiencing God's presence in a collective way, it is a unique experience than doing it on an individual, personal level. Not to take away from the individual and personal, but what he's doing here in this room is different. For a simple example, this is a communal experience, by the way. I'm not sure if you knew this, but I can see you. Like I look into your eyes. Like I can see if you like I have this. Oh, that they're as a collective group. I can feel that we're understanding what's going on. And yeah, okay, we're good. We can move on now. Or oh man, there's a aura of confusion happening right now. And I need to kind of maybe unpack this. It's a communal, alive exchange right now. In worship. In worship, have you considered that your worship, when you engage with the service, that the person next to you needs to hear your individual worship? They need to see you interact with the word. You're not just singing, for yourself. I know worship is a highly personal thing, but it's not just for yourself. You're singing for the people around you. Sometimes I need to hear someone else magnify and sing and worship the glory and goodness of God for my own worship, for my own sake. Let me give you an example or a couple examples. This is a picture of my friend Dean. He's a member here, he's been coming to this church for as long as I know, actually. He's here, I think right now, actually, over there in the back. And he's here most Sundays worshiping God. And I know, just knowing his story a little bit, that he's lived with raising a beautiful daughter with metachromatic leukodystrophy. It's a genetic disorder with no cure. I've watched him for years. When the weather was nice, he'd be out there in our parking lot. He would, because she's wheelchair bound, and he would help her just kind of walk around just in our parking lot. And here he is in this picture, hand in hand, lifting his hands to worship our Creator. His singing, his worship, that influences mine. It enriches mine. It enriches ours. My wife and I, we're currently walking through the soon coming death of her mom, my mother-in-law. She was recently diagnosed with an incurable, terrible disease called multi-system atrophy, which the name of that disease describes it well. She's currently hospitalized due to the disease eating away at her ability to move, and now eating away at her just cognitive ability, and it's breaking down her mind. And the other day, she sent me a video of her at the hospital singing worship songs to her mom in the hospital room. And you could just see, or you could sense, how it just calmed her mom. There was a presence felt there. And my wife is here now, and the praise of Jesus is on her lips in worship. Her singing, her worship, it magnifies. It influences, it inspires, it deepens my worship. It does something to my worship. It does something to our worship, knowing when someone else is going through hell, lifting their hands, lifting their voice, praising our Creator anyways. We are encouraging one another. Our faith is stirring along my faith. My worship is stirring along your worship. Why? Because our church services are not a product, it's a participation. Our church services it's communal. There's a participation piece to it because we are the living stones that gather together to make the spiritual temple. Hebrews chapter 10 says, "Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. Let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now as the day is drawing near." What happens here on Sunday is not a product, it's a participation. And your participation stirs other to love, good works, encouragement. Worship is communal. Point number 3, and this is where we'll kind of be ending. Worship is holy. Worship is holy. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5, Peter continues, "You are the living stones," we just talked about that God is building into his spiritual temple. What's more, you are his holy priests. Through the mediation of Jesus Christ, you offer spiritual sacrifices that please God. Again, let's jump back 2,000-ish years ago, put ourselves into the shoes of the original hearers of this letter. You're a second-century Christian. Your way of life has crumbled. Your way of worship has been taken from you. If you wanted to be near to God, you thought you needed to go to the temple. If you wanted to talk to God, you needed to go to the temple. Now, due to persecution, you can't go. Peter tells you that you are the living stones that make the temple. And then he tells you, you are his holy priests. You are his holy priests. You are not just some random attender. You are not just some random, bystander on a Sunday. Peter tells us today, you are his priest in his temple with the other priests. Notice he doesn't say, all those who stand on stage, they are the holy priests. Or, all those who went to Bible college, they are the holy priests. Or all those who serve in the kids ministry, they are the holy priests. He should have said that. If you are looking to volunteer in the kids ministry, you can come talk to me after service. But he didn't say that. He didn't say that. He did not say that. All those who speak Greek and Hebrew, those. No. If you are a believer and have surrendered your life to Jesus, welcome to the priesthood. Welcome to the priesthood. You are a priest in his temple, and that is a holy thing. What you're doing here, what you're doing right now is holy. It's no light thing. Going into that temple to offer sacrifices to the Lord 2,000 plus years ago, that was no small endeavor. That was no small task. Every single Sunday when you come to church gathered, you are a priest walking into his building, the temple. You might be looking at me and you're like, I've only been saved for a month or two. Actually, Jonathan, I just got baptized last week. Welcome to the priesthood. I thought it was for the real mature, believer. Welcome to the priesthood. Every time you come to church, the priesthood is gathering together to magnify and worship and exalt our Creator. Something holy happens here. Something holy happens when we gather and we fix our attention on God together. Something unique happens. Something powerful happens. Worship is holy. And you now offer spiritual sacrifices. You offer spiritual sacrifices. And so what I want to do, kind of in our remainder time, is I want to quickly look at what did a priest do back in the day, thousands and thousands of years ago. What did a priest do? And what does that look like today? Because priests offered sacrifices to God. And Peter says that we offer spiritual sacrifices. So there's obviously a connection here. So what did a priest do? I have a map of the tabernacle here. And we're going to go through this very quickly. But I think getting a brief understanding of what a priest did, because Peter is saying we are priests. And so understanding what a priest did influences what we do today. And so the very first thing a priest would do is they'd walk in through this open gate, and they'd go into this outer court. And in front of them would be this huge bronze altar. It's right there. It says the brazen altar. And it's from this side right to left. That's kind of the entrance there is the brazen altar. That's the first thing that the priest would see. And that's where they would offer animal sacrifices. The priest would bring animals and they would sacrifice them. And that's where that was at. It was bloody. It was messy. It wasn't convenient. And they would lay their sacrifice on the altar. Worship for us begins with sacrifice. Cue Romans, you don't offer literal sacrifices here. You are the sacrifice. Romans 12:1 says, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Sometimes how we start worship as priests is we put ourselves on the altar. God, I sacrifice myself. I sacrifice my mood. I don't want to be here. I don't really, I'm only here because, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't really want to be here. Sacrifice your mood. I don't really like that song. I don't know. Sacrifice your preferences. I don't really feel like it. Sacrifice. Worship begins with sacrifice. Worship has always started with sacrifice. But of course, we're not sacrificing an animal. Today, we're sacrificing ourselves. The next thing a priest would do, and if you can pull up that, thank you, the map's up, is it says there the brazen altar, but you see it's like a circle. It's like a laver or a basin, because sacrifice is messy. I know I kind of gave kind of cute examples there of like your mood and your preferences. Sacrificing yourself for God is actually a pretty messy thing. And what worship is what a priest would do is they'd look into the basin, they'd see their reflection in the water, and they would see blood and where they need to be cleaned up, right? Worship is like that for us. As priests, we sacrifice, and as priests, we see the areas of our lives where it's like, that needs to be cleaned up. Worship is like entering into the living water of God, allowing him to wash us anew. It's like the priest washing himself clean. It's allowing God to do that to our hearts, allowing God to do that to our souls. And I know you've experienced this in worship, when you're just sacrificing yourself to God and giving it up to him. And then the Holy Spirit comes and speaks to you and there's, reveals areas of your life that man, I need to give that to God. I need to sacrifice that to God. That's looking into that laver. That's what a priest did, and that's what we do today, looking in and reflecting on what areas of my life need to be cleansed. What areas of my life need to be washed anew. And then once they've washed off, they would enter in through this massive curtain. And they'd be in a room that there was a curtain behind them, and then it was closed off. And there would be a golden lampstand in the corner. Oh yeah, there it is. On this map, it says the holy candlestick, but another name for it is the golden lampstand. And that golden lampstand would be the only light into the room. The only light, and it would be closed off, dark, except for the light emanating from that candle. Why? Because God is the only light we need. Worship is a reminder that, this is the path. Like, God, you are the light to my path. These are the steps that I take. It's your way and your way alone. It's you and you alone. It's your way. You're the reason I have breath. You're the reason why I'm even able to be here today, and I just give it to you. That's what the priest was a reminder of, is that's the only light in that room, because for us, as we worship, God is the only true light. And then after that, there would be a table with bread. I think it was called the showbread. Oh, yeah, table of shewbread, yeah. And there was communion. There was a bread and a cup. For them, it was a reminder of the covenant that God made for them. And for us, it's a reminder of the covenant God made for us as well on the cross. And we do that most Sundays, and we'll do it as well today. We'll take communion together. And then lastly, there was an altar of incense. And, I have this little incense thing here. You might not be able to see it, but there's this... there was an altar of incense, and what the priest would do, of course, is they would light the incense. Anyone here like incense? If you don't, I'm sorry. You're just not going to fill the room. But for them, what it would do, of course, is this aroma would fill the room. You can probably, if you're close, I don't know if the light works or not, but you can see kind of smoke rising up, right? And for them, after they've offered their sacrifices, after, they've been washed, after they've, been reminded of the covenant that they have, the covenant promise with God, after all of that, they then offer their prayers, they offer their worship, they offer their lives as an aroma to God. For them, it's incense. It's representative of the prayers of the people rising up to God. And for us today, we are that aroma. It's our worship. It's our praise. It's us lifting up our hands. It's the way we live our lives. We are that living sacrifice. We are the aroma rising up to God that is beautiful and sweet. Psalm 141 says this: "Let the lifting of my hands be like the evening sacrifice, and may the praise on my lips be like the burning of incense." In worship, that's us. In worship, that's what we do. I'm not sure if you've ever considered that your worship and your prayers and your heart and the way you live your life, the prayers that are from the bottom of our souls, the actions that we do with our hands, the way we hold ourselves to the world, this is the aroma like incense rising up. As the incense rises up in the atmosphere of this room, that's the incense being lifted up to God. These are the 5 things, the 5 holy things that a priest would do each time that they would enter into the temple of worship, or enter into the temple to worship God. And these are the 5 things that every single priest would do. And I think these are some of the things that we do on Sunday mornings. These are some of the things that we do as we gather together. We offer our lives as a living sacrifice. We allow the water of God to wash us anew. We remind ourselves that it's Jesus and Jesus alone. It's his way. That's the life that we build our life on. That is the cornerstone. That is the direction we head. That is where we go. We participate in communion with God and with each other. And we allow God to receive our prayer and worship, the worship of our heart, as a sweet aroma being lifted to heaven, like the burning of incense. Worship team, you can come on back. What we're going to do here in a moment is we're going to enter into worship together. And with all of this said, what I want us to think about, what I want us to meditate on, is one aspect, maybe of the 5 things, or one aspect of how worship is a cultivated craving, or how worship is communal, or how worship is holy, and how we are the living stones gathering together, or we are the holy priests. What is one thing that God, the Holy Spirit, spoke to you? And what we're going to do is we're going to sing a couple songs of worship, and then we'll take communion afterwards. So why don't we all stand as we worship together?